Alrighty, everyone. It is Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this is the Mike Wink Show. So we're going to start off today talking about a funny little thing that happened last night, just nothing big. I decided to ride to the local shawarma kebab shop, maybe 3 or 4 miles away. Decided to ride my bike at maybe midnight, 1 a.m.-ish to go pick up food. They're open super late, maybe 2:30, 3 a.m. or something. And so I'm on the way back. I've already picked up the food. I'm on the way back, and I'm riding through sort of a suburby residential streets, trying to avoid the major streets. I'm on a bike. I have lights on my bike, but I'd rather take the slightly longer route, go through the residential streets, and not have to worry about dealing with cars on the major street that might not be paying attention. But anyways, I'm riding back, and I decided to take a slightly different route. There's this church that I normally ride all the way around the right side, but there's sort of an alley that kind of stretches around the left side of it. So I decided to go through the alley to see if it connected on the other side. Well, it's pitch black out. It's 1 a.m. I'm riding. There's nobody else out. And so I start riding down this alley, and about quarter of the way down the alley, it's like a chain link fence. So on the right side, it's a chain link fence for the church. And then on the left side, it's the chain link fence for the backyards of the houses on the left side of the alley. And so I'm riding, and I come across a possum, an opossum that's sitting in the middle of the alley. And so I sort of tap the brakes, but I kind of keep moving. I slow down, and I sort of center my bike light on him as to try and scare him away. I was worried. It's such a narrow alley with fences on both sides that I was worried that if I tried to ride past him to the side of him, that maybe he would jump out or get scared or something at me. And so I wanted to shine the light right on him to hopefully, corral him to sort of lead him over off the road and away from me. And so I shine the light on him from my bike. He freezes and then notices I'm still moving towards him and starts running down the alley. But there's nowhere for him to turn, right? Because it's just chain link fences on both sides. Yeah, there's turn-ins for the driveways of the people's houses on the left side of the alley, but there aren't that many of them, and it's pitch black out. So I'm riding, and he starts running down straight away from me. So I'm basically chasing him at this point down the alley. And opossums don't run that fast. I'm going the exact same speed I was after I tapped the brakes. He starts running down the alley, or I guess it could be a she, I'm not know. The possum starts running down the alley, and then as I'm very slowly catching up, he I guess freaks out and takes a 90-degree turn and runs straight into one of these chain link fences. I guess not seeing the fence there, but just running 90-degree turn, boom, right, face first, right into the fence, and just froze. It hit the fence, and I think realized this was not good, and literally just froze. And I just rode on by. I felt really bad because I'm sure that hurt. The opossum was probably running as fast as it could, and it just ran face first into this chain link fence. I felt pretty bad, but there wasn't really much else I could do. I was trying to help it out by kind of corralling it off the road and away from me so I wouldn't hit it, or it wouldn't, no conflict would happen. But putting aside it being a little, it being, oh, that kind of sucks that he ran into it. It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny watching this opossum just go boom, right into the fence and just freeze oh no. It was, I don't know. You could hear the audible sound of the chain link fence kind of doing that ching, as soon as he ran into it. It was a very, I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny. I felt bad for the opossum, but let's be real, probably didn't hurt it that much. It probably gave it a little ouchie. And so, yeah, I feel a little bad, but also it was pretty funny. So, alrighty. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes of today. So this is very similar to the story we covered with the Cuban women's volleyball team that was supposed to play in a tournament in Puerto Rico. The U.S.'s new draconian, ridiculous visa restrictions on a number of countries made it so that the Cuban women's volleyball team was unable to get their visas were denied, so they couldn't go to Puerto Rico to compete in this tournament. And apparently that tournament had some big implications for points and their ability to play in some new future league or whatever. And apparently this was all a big problem because the Cuban women's volleyball team was apparently very, very good. And that they would have otherwise, and that being barred from entering this tournament will have real tangible ramifications for them and their ability to play in certain leagues moving forward. This is a very similar story. Venezuelan youth baseball team denied visas is left out of tournament in U.S. So it seems like the exact same thing has happened with a Venezuelan youth baseball team trying to compete in the Little League World Series. After a team of talented teenage baseball players from Venezuela swept through a qualifying tournament in Mexico last month, it seemed they were bound for the Senior League World Series in the United States, ready to take on some of the world's best youth ball clubs. But when the championship round begins in Easley, South Carolina on Saturday, the undefeated squad from Venezuela will not be there. The team, Sakik Mara, has been denied the visas necessary to attend, the Little League Baseball International said Friday. A team from Mexico will take its place. The Senior League World Series invites 12 teams of players ages 13 to 16, older than those in the higher-profile Little League World Series, which is for ages 10 to 12 and is a staple of ESPN's daytime summer programming. Okay, so this is for the one step up from the Little League World Series. This is the Teenage World Series, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Kaki Mara said it learned a week ago that the visas had been denied. Its players raised in one of the world's most unstable countries are demoralized, the team's president said. It appeared that Kaki Mara had been swept up in the severe travel restrictions that President Trump has placed on more than a dozen countries. The administration allows exceptions for athletes and coaches traveling for major athletic competitions such as the World Cup and Olympics. Okay, so I wonder if they specifically use the verbiage of major athletic competitions such as the World Cup and the Olympics so that they can get away with denying people from these countries that otherwise should be allowed entry to play in these tournaments. Basically, they're using these, they're using the cover that other events are not as major as, or not truly major athletic competitions like the World Cup and the Olympics. They would probably argue cynically that the Little League World Championships or the Teenage World Championships or whatever is like a step down from that. And because of that, they're not expected to allow exceptions for athletes. Kakik Mara said on social media that players and coaches from the team sat for interviews on July 14th to try and secure visas, but were denied by an immigration officer. The White House referred inquiries to the State Department, which said in a statement on Saturday that its consular officers were reviewing the case to check if proper procedures had been followed. Since returning to office, Mr. Trump has imposed travel bans on at least 12 countries, while restricting visas for citizens from another 7 countries, including Venezuela, which is gripped by poverty, hyperinflation, political instability, violent crime, and an authoritarian government. In some cases, the Trump administration has deported Venezuelans in the United States without court hearings. It has claimed that the Venezuelan street gang is trying to invade the country. The president has claimed the gang is committing crimes in the United States at the direction of Venezuela's government, an assertion contradicted by American intelligence agencies. Yeah, the idea that like Venezuela is like coordinatedly, from the top down directing this gang to invade the United States is so like beyond seriousness. It's just hilarious to even entertain the idea of that. Venezuela has long been a baseball hotbed. Some of the most dazzling stars in Major League Baseball in recent years, Miguel Cabrera, Johan Santana, and Jose Altuve, among them, grew up in Venezuela. Teams from the country have won the Senior League World Series 3 times. To qualify for the Senior League World Series, which is run by the same organization that hosts the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, Kakik Mara dominated the Latin America region tournament, played in Ciudad Victoria, Mexico, over 5 days in mid-June. The team won all 5 games in the regional, beating its opponents by 45 runs in total. Little League International said in a statement that it was extremely disappointed that Kakik Mara had not been able to secure the necessary visas. Santa Maria de Aguayo, a team from Victoria, Mexico, will represent the Latin America region instead. The team won 3 games and lost 1 during the regional round. In an interview that Kakik Mara posted on social media, Kendry Gutierrez, the team's president, said the situation was a crushing blow for his players. The situation has not been easy for the team to go through, he said. This team has been working for many years since they were little. He added they simply want the opportunity to go play. The takeaway from this is exactly the same as with the Cuban women's volleyball team, right? There's just no good reason for this. This is insane, right? You know, if I'm going to try and be good faith and like try and steel man the whole like restricting travel from a number of countries to the United States, you are doing that ostensibly to try and keep out like the murderers, the rapists, the criminals, the gang members, all these people that Trump tries to pretend are like make up the majority of immigrants from these countries when really they don't. But like, let's steel man this position for a second. If that is your goal, then you would implement a very robust system of visa exceptions, like a way for people to go through the process and get their visa accepted for something like the Little League World Series or the Teenage World Series or the Cuban or the Women's Volleyball International Tournament in Puerto Rico or whatever. Like, these are the exact kind of things that if you are going to try, to me, it seems obvious, right? If my honest good faith goal was to restrict travel from these countries because I genuinely believed that there was a serious like security threat as a result of people coming from these countries, then like I would be super concerned with the optics of having a program that allows exemptions to the visa, right? I would be super worried that it would be seen as xenophobic and racist, and I would go out of my way to make sure that the system by which people would like get an exemption for their visa and be able to come into the country anyways was robust and very clear, very transparent, and very available. Because like this undermines the argument. The fact that they deny the entry for the Little League World Series and for the Cuban women's volleyball team or whatever undermines the argument that this is like a good faith. We're doing this for national security purposes, right? That we're restricting the visas and entrance from people from these countries. This completely counters that and lends credence to the argument that this was based in racism or xenophobia or some combination of these things, that they just don't like people from other countries, they don't like brown people, or whatever sort of breakdown you want to give it. The fact that they don't have like a serious, robust visa exemption program, like a process for which people to do, and teams like the Cuban women's volleyball team and the Venezuelan Little League baseball team or whatever are getting swept up in this shows to me that they are not interested in like a good faith, interest in American security. This is about something else. This is about whoever in the administration is in Trump's ear that has that just is obsessed with race or xenophobia, or I don't know. It just makes no sense to me. And it seems like the exact opposite thing I would do if I was genuinely interested in restricting travel from these countries because of legitimate security reasons. You would never allow this sort of thing to happen because it's such bad PR. This undermines everything you're doing. It's just dumb. This is just dumb and stupid. And obviously they should just let these freaking kids play. It's insane. Just stupid. Just stupid. Senate confirms lifetime seat for Trump judicial appointee who compared being gay to bestiality. Senate Republicans confirmed anti-LGBTQ Missouri Deputy Solicitor General Joshua Devine to a lifetime seat on the U.S. District Court for the Eastern and Western Districts of Missouri on Tuesday. Devine's appointment was opposed by Senate Democrats and progressive organizations due to his extreme conservative record on abortion and voting rights, HuffPost noted. But Senator Angus King, who usually caucuses with Democrats, joined with Republicans to push Devine's nomination over the line. King, who supports both reproductive rights and voting rights, did not indicate why he ultimately sided with Republicans on Devine's appointment. Why would Angus King... I wonder if maybe I'll look this up. This article is titled, Angus King says he voted to confirm this anti-choice Trump nominee because Josh Hawley asked nicely. Bro, stop. On Tuesday, the Republican-controlled Senate narrowly voted to confirm Josh Devine and Christian Stevens to a pair of district court vacancies in Missouri. Devine, a 35-year-old anti-choice activist who once explained that Christians are obligated ethically to impose their beliefs on others. Wow. Obligated ethically to impose their beliefs on others. Yeah, that's the kind of guy you want to be your judge. You want to be on a lifetime appointment to a federal court. Yeah, that's the dude you want. Is now a federal judge who could start hearing cases as soon as next month. Maine Senator Angus King, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, decided to vote yes on Devine, the first time that any member of the caucus has voted to confirm one of President Donald Trump's second-term judicial nominees. This makes King, who called the Supreme Court's 2022 decision to overturn Roe v. Wade a dangerous, blatantly political ruling that will rob millions of women of the fundamental right to make decisions about their own health, safety, and lives, the only Democrat to sign off on a self-described anti-choice zealot who has argued for a ban on abortion with no exceptions for rape. Yeah, wow, with no exceptions for rape, too. That's huge. As they did with Stevens, the other 46 members of the Democratic caucus voted no. Courtney Bubble reported that this was no accident. King apparently decided to vote for Devine after speaking with Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley, for whom Devine worked as a deputy back when Hawley was Missouri's attorney general. This private conversation, King told Bubble, had convinced him that Devine would be a capable judge. King's decision to cave this early in the second Trump administration and in service of perhaps the most unabashed extremist judge this White House has managed to cough up would be disappointing under any circumstances. To do so as some kind of personal favor to Josh Hawley, a thirsty dunce a thirsty dunce who was once defending the January 6 rioters immediately after fleeing in terror from them, is downright embarrassing. That is a hilarious sentence. To do so as some kind of personal favor to Josh Hawley, a thirsty dunce who was defending the January 6 rioters immediately after fleeing in terror from them, is downright embarrassing. That is such a good sentence. Whoever wrote this article is great. If a chat with the wallet inspector is all it takes to persuade Angus King to confirm a Hawley protege whose ideological agenda he ostensibly opposes, I shudder to imagine what else King could be convinced to vote for with a little buttering up. Absolutely. This isn't so much about like how this one yay vote affects the result of him being nominated or not, because it seems like he was going to get nominated regardless. The point is that he is so easily swayed by Josh Hawley, who is not somebody you should be giving favors to, not somebody you should trust in any way, shape, or form, right? I would imagine it. I just can't help but feel like this is like just an old school Democrat. He's 81 years old, right? This is a Democrat who was born and raised in the fucking like 60s, 70s, and 80s style of politics, right? I can't escape the feeling that I wonder if Josh Hawley is a younger guy. He understands the metagame a little bit more. He's full cynicism, full nihilist. And I just wonder if he's just playing Angus, right? He's literally just playing this old guy who just doesn't understand how politics works anymore, who's just antiquated. On Thursday, a day after this article was published, King told Jen Bendery and Igor Bobek of HuffPost that he's made a mistake by voting for Devine. I took Josh Hawley's advice, King said. In retrospect, I think it was a mistake from what I've learned about Mr. Devine since. But sometimes you rely on your colleagues. King added that he was not fully aware of Devine's anti-choice record before voting to confirm him. Why would you consider Josh Hawley one of your colleagues, bro? The other Democrats that vote with you, the people that are ideologically within arm's reach, are your colleagues, not insane lunatics like Josh Hawley, who's just going to use you and game you and metagame you as much as he possibly can. This is just so stupid. As Alliance for Justice notes, Devine defended Missouri's ban on gender-affirming care for minors and has published articles opposing the right to same-sex marriage. As a college newspaper columnist, Devine reportedly compared homosexuality to bestiality and any form of sex that goes against the biological design of procreation and the nurturing of family. He argued that conservatives... Okay, so wait, is he somebody who... The wording of this makes me think that he would go a step further in arguing just like that any sex at all outside of the context of marriage is bad. He has to hold that position. There's absolutely no way that you could hold the position that like homosexuality is not good because it doesn't lead to procreation, but then you can't also then be okay with sex that is not explicitly for procreation, right? I would think to be consistent, then you would also be against any sex that is not between two married people, specifically a man and a woman. And I would also argue that if you take that logic to its next step, even they shouldn't be having sex unless it's explicitly for the purpose of procreation. He argued that conservatives who oppose same-sex marriage do so not out of hate, but because they are opposed to a group receiving extra benefits. Extra benefits? What extra benefits are there? I don't understand what extra benefits they're receiving. Is the right to get married an extra benefit? I don't understand how that could possibly be the case. They get all the same tax benefits as regular straight married couples would. So I really don't understand what he could possibly be referring to when he says opposed to a group receiving extra benefits. When he says extra, does he mean like on top of what they already have? I don't understand. In one 2010 column, he argued that conservative Christians are obligated ethically to impose their beliefs on others. This is one of the most scary things possible about this, right? This country is supposed to be secular. It's supposed to not advocate explicitly for one religion over another or for religion over non-religion. But now you have a guy who's going to be on the bench who is not going to hold back in like the reasoning why, like he is a pure theocrat, it seems like, and like he's going to use his theocratic ideology as the basis for which he's going to do his judicial rulings. If our government made any sense at all, the Republicans would never ever vote in somebody to a lifetime judicial appointment that has said that Christians are obligated ethically to impose their beliefs on others. That means that this means that he literally, straight up, that we don't even need to speculate about this, he will use his power as a lifetime appointment federal judge to impose his Christian belief on others. Straight up, that's just what's going to happen. It seems absolutely beyond the pale to me that even the Republicans would allow this. He was also virulently opposed reproductive freedom, defending Missouri's near total ban on abortion and representing the state in ongoing litigation opposing the FDA's authority to regulate mifepristone, according to both Alliance for Justice and Reproductive Freedom for All. The 35-year-old will now hold a lifetime seat on the court, potentially imposing his far-right agenda for decades to come. In a separate statement, Reproductive Freedom for All president and CEO Minnie Timaraju blasted Devine's confirmation, arguing that it proves that Trump lied to voters when he claimed during his campaign that he would leave decisions about abortion access to the states. Trump, Timaraju said, is actively working to eliminate abortion access nationwide. Federal courts are a critical line of defense to preserve reproductive health care, Timaraju said, adding that Devine's appointment, as well as that of anti-abortion Judge Whitney Hermendorfer to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, are a dangerous sign of what's to come. Yeah, this just seems like a big step back. I just have a feeling that in the early 2000s, if you went back 20 years or so, if somebody, I think back when the government maybe worked a little bit more like it should, the Republicans and Democrats would, at least to some degree, I'm sure there'd still be some holdouts that would vote for him or whatever, but I would imagine at least to some degree they would come together and say, all right, maybe a guy saying that Christians are obligated to impose their beliefs on others is maybe not the best guy to be putting on a federal lifetime appointment to an appeals court, federal appeals court, or whatever the hell he's being appointed to. I also feel like maybe 20 years ago or at other periods of time, the idea that this guy would be directly comparing homosexuality to bestiality would also be a non-starter, would also be the Republicans would be having deliberations internally guys, we're already fighting the stereotype that we're anti-gay or whatever, that we're, we need to be careful about who we associate ourselves with and these kind of guys that are, I don't know. I feel like maybe in the past they would have cared a little bit more about the optics of this, but nothing matters anymore. I think we're at the total point of nothing matters whatsoever anymore because everything's so spread out. Back when we used to have only a handful of news outlets that the majority of people would get their news from, it was hard for things like this to fall through the cracks because they would permeate through and everybody would manage to see them. But I would argue now in the era of the internet in 2025, everything is so spread out. There are a gajillion different sources that people get their news or information from or whatever, that it is, I would say, not only easy for things to fall through the cracks, but I would say it's almost inherently part of its design. And that the idea that like there are swaths and swaths of people out there that have no idea that this sort of thing would happen. And this sort of thing would never come across their feed. They would never learn this sort of thing. I don't really even know where I'm going with all this. I feel like in the past, this dude maybe would have gotten filtered out of the equation. But there seems to be in the Republican Party a renewed penchant for xenophobia, for anti-LGBTQ, anti-gay, just there. It seems to be coming back. It seems like for a long time that was part of their shtick, and then maybe from like the 80s to like the early to mid 2000s, they had to walk that back. But now it almost seems like it's coming back again. I don't know. Insanity. The Supreme Court is now asking judges to do the impossible. The Supreme Court expanded Donald Trump's power yet again on Wednesday, granting him the authority to fire Democratic members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission in direct violation of federal law. What? Granting him the authority to fire Democratic members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission in direct violation of federal law. Over the liberal justice's dissent, the conservative supermajority greenlit the first step of Trump's systemic destruction of the agency, a plan that collides with many other federal statutes. The court's action imperils the CPSC's ability to ban products that may maim or kill consumers, including children, giving corporations freer rein to flood the market with dangerous goods. And it hands the president even more leeway to restructure the federal government in ways that hurt regular people, reward the wealthy, and contradict Congress's direct commands. I need to read the granting him the authority to fire Democrats. I need to read more about this. That seems absolutely freaking insane. Supreme Court allows Trump to fire 3 Democratic consumer product safety commissioners. The Supreme Court on Wednesday allowed the Trump administration to remove 3 Democratic members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission who had been fired by President Donald Trump and then reinstated by a federal judge. The justices acted on an emergency appeal from the Justice Department, which argued that the agency is under Trump's control and the president is free to remove commissioners without cause. That's what Trump did in May, providing no reason for removing all 3 Democratic commissioners on the 5-person board, despite a federal law that allows commissioners to be fired only for neglect of duty or malfeasance. The court provided a brief, unsigned explanation that the case is similar to earlier ones in which it allowed Trump to fire board members of other independent agencies whom Congress protected from arbitrary dismissals. The 3 liberal justices dissented. By means of such actions, this court may facilitate the permanent transfer of authority, piece by piece by piece, from one branch of government to another. Justice Elena Kagan wrote for herself, as well as Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson. The obvious takeaway from this is that the Democrats need to use this the next time they are in power. They're not going to because they're a bunch of but this is what they need to do. This is so awful. When Republicans do some shit like this, they change the rules. The rules of politics are from this point on, with regards to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, has changed, right? The rules have changed. The rules have changed to whoever is in power, the Republicans or the Democrats, get to officially just make the whole commission their side, okay? That is how this has to be treated moving forward. So if the Democrats gain power again, if there's a Democratic president moving forward, and they choose to not fire any Republicans that are on that commission, they are a joke. They should not be in office. They are not representative of true resistance party. They are control. I might as well even go to the point that they're controlled opposition, that they're a joke. There is no, this is one of those instances where the rules have changed, and literally the only logical, like the only step that makes any sense at all from a metagame perspective for the Democrats is to take this in and use this moving forward. The next time they are in power, the next time they have a Democratic president in office, they need to take over the Consumer Product Safety Commission and fire any Republican on there. Every single time, the second they get in office, they have to do it. They have to do it. it's not that they like should do it, that it would be good strategy. They literally have to do it. If they don't do it, I think that they are purposefully trying to lose, because this is metagame 101. This is basic. Everybody should know. This is obvious. The commission helps protect consumers from dangerous products by issuing recalls, suing errant companies, and more. The fired commissioners had been serving 7-year terms after being nominated by President Joe Biden. Okay, so they have a term-based system, right? They have a system by which these people naturally cycle in and out of this commission, and it seems like it's on a 7-year cycle to try and prevent the president or whoever's in office from stacking it, every time a new president comes into office. That seems like the whole point of having them be on 7-year cycles, 7-year terms. But I guess all of that's out the window now. U.S. District Judge Matthew Maddox in Baltimore ruled in June that the dismissals were unlawful. Maddox sought to distinguish the commission's role from those of other agencies where the Supreme Court has allowed firings to go forward. A month earlier, the High Court's conservative majority declined to reinstate members of the National Labor Relations Board and the Merit Systems Protections Board, finding that the Constitution appears to give the president the authority to fire the board members without cause. The administration has argued that all the agencies are under Trump's control as the head of the executive branch. This is such a huge problem, though, because these agencies were designed to only have a minimum amount of executive control, right? These agencies were designed to delegate power from Congress. Congress realizes, they recognized, okay, we can't litigate every single environmental aspect, right? One way to think about it is that people in Congress are generalists for the most part, right? They're generalists. They kind of have a surface level understanding of all political concepts, but they're not really a policy expert. Some of them are, but the average congressperson doesn't know exactly how much carbon, would be okay for a company to emit, in a given area. They don't know the exact carbon rate that would be ideal for that and targets. And they're not privy to that kind of deep environmental analysis. They may have a surface level understanding of what sort of environmental policies would be good, but they don't have that deep understanding. And so with that analysis, with that understanding, if they didn't have agencies, then every time they wanted to change the rules regarding the exact carbon emission rates and whatnot, they would have to, every member of Congress would have to vote yes or no on some bill that says 0.34% of carbon emissions out of this sort of thing is blah, blah, blah. It's just too in the weeds. And so they purposefully created the Environmental Protection Agency, for instance, to suss out all of those details. They give them sort of broad directives saying it's your job to, watch over the environment, make sure there isn't that much pollution, ensure that companies aren't over polluting, ensure that our rivers and waterways are safe and whatnot. They have these broad directives, and then they're given deference to sort of interpret these directives and do what they need to do, impose certain laws, change that carbon number to whatever it needs to be after a new study or whatever. They have that deference to make those calls, and that on the edges of the directive. So where, maybe the directive is to protect the waterways, and then the EPA is maybe doing something that's sort of on the border of their authority. That's where the courts step in and sort of adjudicate whether what the agency is doing is constitutional or not. And so with all of this understanding, the president is the head of the executive. These agencies are technically part of the executive branch of the government. So theoretically, the president does have some oversight over these agencies. Now, the idea before this Trump administration took office was that these agencies had certain positions that were political appointees, but the vast majority of people working in these agencies are career subject matter experts, right? People working in the EPA that are their career is working in the EPA. They are a subject matter expert. They may have a master's degree in environmental pollution or some nonsense like that. And they are not a political actor. They are not there politically. They are there specifically to do their job, which is some sort of environmental analysis or whatever. And that only the very top members of the organization, of the agency, are subject to presidential appointee. This was talked about in Project 2025, their idea of reclassifying federal workers. There's different classifications of federal workers, right? There's, as far as I understand, is those high-level appointees that like the head of the APA, the vice president of the APA, the secretary, those like top positions that the president does have the power and maybe should have the power to appoint, but that everybody below them they're just career subject matter experts. And the whole concept of firing them or hiring them based on politics is just like not the point of the organization. That's sort of antithetical to the whole point of it all. So the idea that the Supreme Court is just going to throw out the precedent of all of this and say, no, it doesn't matter, the way we have all of this intricately structured, the way that the whole point of our government is to have checks and balances and everything is sort of intertwined together to work properly. No, they're throwing that entirely out the window and just saying, nope, because it's under the executive, Trump has full authority to do whatever the hell he wants, which is just so dangerous and so antithetical to like a proper checks and balances functioning of a democratic society, of a government. Maddox, a Biden nominee, noted that it can be difficult to characterize the Product Safety Commission's functions as purely executive. The fight over the president's power to fire could prompt the court to consider overturning a 90-year-old Supreme Court decision known as Humphrey's Executor. In that case from 1935, the court unanimously held that presidents cannot fire independent board members without cause. Okay, so there is a Supreme Court precedent already established for this exact thing. The Supreme Court is changing this old ruling then, sort of like how Roe v. Wade was the precedent, the legal precedent for a long time, and they just threw that out the window however many number of years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. It seems like they're doing the exact same thing here, that since 1935, the idea that the president cannot fire independent board members without cause was the precedent, was the law of the land, but now that has been completely thrown out of the window. I also, I'm going to make a soft prediction here. I have just let's say the Democrats do manage to grow a freaking backbone, and then let's say somehow a Democrat gets elected in 2028, and then they come in and they are actually going to fire, they're going to get rid of everybody else, all the Republicans on this commission. I just have an itching feeling that the Republicans on the Supreme Court, the conservative lunatics, are just going to suddenly remember the Humphrey's Executor precedent from 90 years ago and go, oh, but you can't fire those Republicans. They're the Humphrey's Executor. But they wouldn't, but they didn't apply this to when Trump. I just have a feeling that this Supreme Court is just so ideologically biased at this point that they are just going to, and they don't even need to pretend, right? There's no backstop. They can just be as blatantly biased and politically ideological and favoring one side over the other as they want to with zero ramifications. The decision ushered in an era of powerful independent federal agencies charged with regulating labor relations, employment discrimination, the airwaves, and much more. But it has long rankled conservative legal theorists who argue the modern administrative state gets the Constitution all wrong because such agencies should answer to the president. Kagan wrote that the court already has all but overturned Humphrey's Executor. See, it seems like a really big problem if this is your outlook on how this works, but it has long rankled conservative legal theorists who argue the modern administrative state gets the Constitution all wrong because such agencies should answer to the president. If that is the case, then I would think this person would also argue that the whole concept of agencies in themselves are unconstitutional because it is Congress abdicating the responsibility. It is Congress redelegating its responsibility, saying we understand that regulating the environment and whatnot and whatever the EPA does is in our purview, but that it's too in the weeds for us to handle on a case-by-case basis, and that we're going to delegate our responsibility to this agency to handle it. So I would think that if this person thinks the executive and these agencies are exclusively under the purview of the president, then and it's Congress's job, they're the one that create these agencies in the first place, I would assume this person would be against agencies at all. That the whole concept of Congress delegating its responsibility like this over to the executive branch of the government is completely antithetical to the checks and balances system we have in the first place. Kagan wrote that the court already has all but overturned Humphrey's Executor. Yeah, it seems like this is literally completely antithetical to it. I wonder if they're purposefully not coming out and saying we're overturning this former legal precedent, Humphrey's Executor, Specifically for the reason I'm saying, so that if a Democrat comes into office 4 or 5 years from now, they can use it cynically in their favor and just like, oh, the President Humphreys executor, Democrat president, you can't fire these Republican members of the board. Sorry, haha. Like, last week, a federal judge ordered Rebecca Slaughter reinstated as a commissioner. Slaughter returned to work Friday, but by Tuesday, she had been sidelined again after an appeals court temporarily blocked the judge's order. The Consumer Product Safety Commission was created in 1972. Its 5 members must maintain a partisan split, with no more than 3 representing the president's party. They serve staggered terms. So I would think its 5 members must maintain a partisan split. I would argue that if it is part of the agency's design that they use the word must maintain a partisan split, I would argue that's inherently part of the design of the agency, and that is a part of its design that cannot just be legally thrown out. That, like, if you are going to throw out this, if you're going to say that the president has the ability to assign whoever they want to this executive, to this board, that they can fire whoever they want from this board, that I would think then that he must dissolve that he would be required to dissolve this board or this agency entirely, because unless Trump is going to fire these Democratic board members and then reappoint more Democratic board members to maintain a partisan split, then he won't have a partisan split, right? If he just appoints more Republicans and it's a 5 Republican board, then there is no partisan split. And part of the directive of this agency originally was it must maintain a partisan split. So I would argue that if you're going to fire these people and appoint Republicans, then the whole agency needs to be dissolved based on the rules of it. That structure ensures that each president has the opportunity to influence but not control the commission, attorneys for the fired commissioners wrote in court filings. They argued the recent terminations could jeopardize the commission's independence. The Supreme Court expanded Donald Trump's power yet again on Wednesday, granting him the authority to fire Democratic members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission in direct violation of federal law. Over the liberal justice's dissent, the conservative supermajority greenlit the first step of Trump's systemic destruction of the agency, a plan that collides with many other federal statutes. The court's actions imperils the CPSC's ability to ban products that may maim or kill consumers, including children, giving corporations freer rein to flood the market with dangerous goods. And it hands the president even more leeway to restructure the federal government in ways that hurt regular people, reward the wealthy, and contradict Congress's direct commands. What's perhaps most galling about Wednesday's decision, aside from the fact that it makes us all less safe, is SCOTUS's reprimand of lower courts that try to stop Trump's abuses of power. The majority scolded these courts for failing to interpret the smoke signals it has sent up on the shadow docket and, instead, daring to enforce existing precedent that limits executive authority. It seems the Republican-appointed justices are determined to radically rewrite the law without admitting what they're doing or offering any explanation, while demanding that lower courts somehow read their minds and fall in line. These justices are increasingly embracing the Trump administration's scornful attitude towards any judge who stands in its way. Yet they do not appear to recognize that by undermining lower courts, they are putting their own independence at risk as well. Congress created the CPSC in 1972 to protect consumers from products that could injure or kill them. It established the commission as a bipartisan agency whose 5 members were shielded from removal by the president. Lawmakers insisted upon this independence to ensure that it could operate unfettered by political dictates, self-interested industry pressure, or blind consumer zeal. Over the past 53 years, it has fulfilled its duties, outlawing risky products and, when appropriate, penalizing the companies that sell them. A scan of recent recalls illustrates the breadth of the agency's work. In recent months, the CPSC has issued warnings about e-bike batteries that explode, above-ground pools that drown children, streamers that spew boiling water, loading ramps that break in use, baby gates that entrap and suffocate kids, and a bug zapper that shocks users. The list goes on, in part because the federal government imposes relatively few regulations before products go to market, relying instead on post-sale recalls to remove hazardous goods. Okay, yes, exactly the point. This article brings up an amazing point about this. This list goes on, in part because the federal government imposes relatively few regulations before products go to market, relying instead on post-sale recalls to remove hazardous goods. So if we don't have a robust product regulation system, in that our way of handling bad products and dangerous products in the market is to remove them via recall, and this is the agency that does these recalls, and he's wanting to stack it ideologically in his favor after the agency was specifically, this board was created specifically to shield it from such a partisan action, is like, I don't understand how the Supreme Court justices could possibly make this sort of judgment in good faith, but like, they're just not acting in good faith anymore. They're just not. The conservative members of the Supreme Court, rather. Trump, however, does not like the CPSC because it has the power to investigate and punish companies that sell these goods. And many of these companies' owners donate to the Republican Party. So the Trump administration seeks to abolish the agency and transfer remnants of its mission to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When the CPSC's 3 Democratic members objected to this unlawful interference with their mission, the president fired them. They then sued, arguing correctly that federal law barred their removal. The lower courts agreed and reinstated all 3 members. Trump's Justice Department then asked the Supreme Court to fire them again, which it did on Wednesday by a 6-3 vote. That decision came as no surprise. In May, the same Supreme Court majority allowed Trump to fire members of 2 other federal agencies who were protected against removal by law. Those terminations directly contradict a 90-year-old Supreme Court precedent, Humphrey's executor, that upheld removal protections at independent agencies. The majority, though, did not explain why it had ignored this precedent when it rubber-stamped Trump's illegal removals. That silence, so they didn't even, exactly what I'm saying. Because they have such a strong supermajority on the Supreme Court and its lifetime appointments, and there's zero way to impeach them, basically, that they don't have to give an explanation, and that in these rulings like this, that there really is no good steelman reasonable explanation for their rulings, besides they want to just capitulate to Daddy Trump. They don't have to give an explanation. They can just stamp it and just move on, which is just awful. That silence left the lower courts in a quandary. Should they follow binding precedent that renders the firings illegal, or should they assume that SCOTUS has quietly overturned that precedent on the shadow docket? These courts stuck with the rule book, which obligates them to follow precedent until it's formally overturned. For that, they received a rebuke from the High Court this week. In an unsigned opinion, the majority reprimanded the lower courts for failing to infer that May's shadow docket order was meant to inform how a court should exercise its equitable discretion in like cases. The district and appeals court should have intuited that SCOTUS thinks the government faces unacceptable harm when a removed officer may continue exercising their statutory duty. Wait, that's such a weird sentence. The district and appeals courts should have intuited that SCOTUS thinks the government faces unacceptable harm when a removed officer may continue exercising their statutory duty. But they're not a removed officer, though. The rules prevent them from being a removed officer. I'm confused by that. They also should have realized that May's case does not differ from this one in any pertinent respect, even though this case involves an entirely different agency that wields distinct powers. In short, these judges should have deciphered the Supreme Court's hints to divine that Humphrey's executor is suddenly a dead letter after 90 years on the books. This declaration enshrines a new rule for the entire judiciary. No longer can lower courts apply the law as it stands today. They must try to anticipate where the law will stand tomorrow and align their rulings with that prophecy. Rather than enforcing precedent, these courts must scrutinize SCOTUS's shadow docket decisions for any hint of where the conservative supermajority will take the law next and try to get there first. This new command is fundamentally unworkable, and not just because judges have no special ability to predict the future. The deeper problem, as Justice Elena Kagan noted in her dissent on Wednesday, is that the court frequently does not explain its shadow decisions at all. More and more, the majority simply halts an injunction against the Trump administration without offering a word of explanation. For instance, Kagan pointed out the court allowed Trump to begin dismantling the Department of Education last week by purging more than 1,400 workers and shuttering key offices. Why? It didn't tell us, and the DOJ offered at least 4 different reasons for SCOTUS to permit the firings, ranging from standing claims to jurisdictional arguments to narrow attacks on the district court's remedial order. Which reason did the court embrace? We do not know. The same is true of the court's... That's such a problem, though, right? That, to me, the fact that they are not offering clear reason explanations to me on these majority decisions, like especially important ones like this that like implicate the powers of lower courts and whatnot, shows to me that this is not a good faith decision by this court. They're not acting in good faith. They're not, they're not an independent legal body. They're not independent legal minds that are separate. They're above the political fray and just reading the Constitution and leading the law, the letter of the law as it is. That is just not what they're doing, though. They don't even need to write a dissent, write a majority. They just need to acknowledge which of the DOJ's arguments they are going with legally to allow them to do what they're asking to do. I just feel like if they were acting in good faith, there would be no question they would want to be very clear on their decision and write an opinion piece and very clearly lay out where the precedent sits, where their reasoning is and whatnot. But the fact that they aren't offering this explanation to me makes me, and I think reasonably so, lean towards the corruption angle. They're just going to do whatever Daddy Trump wants them to do, and they want to maintain certain legal precedents and loopholes so that they can cynically not apply the same precedents to the next Democratic president, so that they can act as an overtly political wing. The same is true of the court's June decision allowing the expulsion of immigrants to third countries without due process. The DOJ raised a slew of arguments to defend the program, including a challenge to the nationwide class of plaintiffs and a wholly distinct claim on the merits. Which swayed SCOTUS? Once again, it declines to tell us. Yet now the majority informs us that these unexplained orders are meant to inform how a court should exercise its equitable discretion in like cases. What that probably means in practice is that courts should just defer to Trump on the assumption that SCOTUS will award him a victory anyway. By browbeating judges into submission, the Supreme Court can lighten its workload, minimizing the need to issue further emergency orders on behalf of the president. In the words of Kagan's dissent, this approach will also facilitate the permanent transfer of authority, piece by piece, from one branch of government to another. So for now, it is all upside for the Republican-appointed justices who are clearly sick and tired of the judiciary boxing in Trump's agenda. But these justices have their own agenda too, and it will not always align with the president's. They seem to think they can throw lower courts under the bus for Trump without sacrificing their own authority to tell him no when the time comes. But this administration has already defied one in 3 judges ruling against it. And it is wishful thinking, verging on delusion, for these justices to believe that the Supreme Court alone can still command obedience from the man it seeks to crown as king. Yeah, this is, the fact that they aren't providing clear precedent-based majority explanations for their rulings on very important, rulings like this that implicate the powers of lower courts and whatnot, to me, makes me lean towards the corruption angle so much harder than the good faith, they just disagree with my legal interpretation. It makes me lean towards they're just doing whatever Daddy Trump wants. They're completely ideological, completely politically captured, and that whenever the Democrat president comes in next, they're going to change their tune completely and suddenly embrace writing opinions, suddenly embrace all these precedents. Even if they directly contradict the leeway, the rulings that they gave the Trump administration. Just rank corruption, just clear partisan nonsense on the Supreme Court. I saw this earlier today, and this is absolutely crazy. Pete Whiskey Leak Hegseth's secret deal to get Trump his free Qatari jet is leaked. So it wasn't just, a gift to the American people, and it's really not a bribe at all. It's not directly going to him. No. Apparently all of that nonsense has gone out the window. The U.S. has formally received Qatar's unconditional donation of a $400 million 747-8 Boeing jet for the Trump administration to use as Air Force One. Defense Secretary Pete WhiskeyLeak Hegseth and his Qatari counterpart earlier this month signed a memorandum of understanding which allows Trump to use the plane once he leaves office, ABC News reported Monday. Now, my understanding was that the original deal, the whole way that all of this was allowed in the first place, was that it wasn't a gift directly to Trump. It was a gift to, the American people, to the country, and that Trump would be allowed to use it for Air Force One, but that following him leaving office, he could not personally take this plane with him after he left office. That basically he is not allowed to receive this gift, but the American people, the president's seat, is allowed to receive this gift. But it seems like all of that has completely gone out the window at this point, and that, which is not shouldn't surprise anybody whatsoever, that Trump just wanted the plane, and that they're going to use whatever cynical reasoning they possibly can to make that happen. That document describes the plane as a bona fide gift to the Defense Department, with the U.S. paying nothing for it. This donation is made in good faith and in the spirit of cooperation and mutual support between the parties, it states. Nothing in this memorandum of understanding is or shall be interpreted or construed as an offer, promise, or acceptance of any form of bribery, undue influence, or corrupt practice. Of course, it's not corrupt if you just don't say it's corrupt, right? You can just say it's not bribe. Everybody knows that the line between a bribe and not a bribe is just saying, guys, it's not a bribe. That everybody knows that. Come on, guys. Do you seriously gonna think somebody receives money for no reason in a position of political power, receives a large gift like this for no reason in a position of political power? Everybody knows all they have to do is just say it's not a bribe. And then it's not a bribe, guys. Come on. You're being so mean. The memo adds that the plane is not connected or otherwise related to any governmental decision and, as such, is not made, offered, promised, or accepted because of any past, present, or future official act or decision, and is not intended to obtain or retain any improper advantage or to influence any official decision. Wow, that is a word salad to just try and be like, no, it's not a bribe, no, it's not, guys, no, it's not, la 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 la, it's not a bribe. This is corporate speak. This is oh god, this is just corporate speak word salad to try and go, la, it's not a bribe. Oh yeah. The White House did not immediately respond to an inquiry from the Daily Beast. The Defense Department declined to comment. When the gift, which was previously used by the Qatari royal family, was first announced in May, lawmakers, commentators on the right and left, and Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence were critical. Some questioned whether the arrangement was really free, given Trump's transactional approach to the presidency. Yeah, of course. Okay, anybody who's paying. See, this is something that I feel like people who aren't actually paying attention to what's going on this administration would question this statement. They'd see somebody say, some questioned whether the arrangement was really a free given Trump's transactional approach to the presidency. Somebody who isn't paying attention, maybe slightly Republican leaning, maybe voted Trump and doesn't get politics very much, would say something like, oh, come on, you're being so unfair. If Trump's presidency is transactional, then Biden's presidency is transactional or whatever. When that's absolute that's a complete false equivalence. If you look at the pardons that Trump has been issuing, if you look at the people that he's put in his administration, there is absolutely zero comparison to what the Biden administration or really any administration in the past has ever done. The cost of renovations was also a point of concern, given how aviation experts estimated a minimum price tag of $1 billion. That was one of my biggest criticisms of all of this, is it would probably be cheaper to commission a brand new plane of this exact same style with, from scratch, with all of the security and whatnot and all the security stuff that they would have to do on board for Air Force One, than to retrofit this Qatari gifted plane, right? I don't know for certain. I would imagine, I predict that it would be even cheaper to just commission it yourself. But if it's not cheaper, it has to be damn close in price, and that it makes zero sense to spend $1 billion renovating this plane. Taxpayer money. And also the idea that we're going to spend $1 billion of taxpayer money to renovate this plane, but then Trump gets to take it with him when he leaves office. That seems like that doesn't make any sense at all. How could that possibly be? I say, how could that possibly be legal? The concept of legality doesn't exist with this administration. So I don't know. The Defense Department recently transferred nearly that much for a classified project, the New York Times reported Sunday. Air Force officials told the outlet that some of the money would be spent on renovating the aircraft that has been called a flying palace. After Trump leaves office, ownership of the plane will transfer to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation, Hegseth confirmed during a June Senate Appropriations Committee hearing, but that didn't sit well with some lawmakers. Why would we ask the American taxpayer to spend upwards of $1 billion on a plane that would then only be used for a handful of months and then transfer directly to the president? Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy asked. That doesn't sound like a wise use of taxpayer dollars. Okay, so I think I maybe slightly misinterpreted it before. I think this presidential library thing is his personal, like basically his personal account, right? His personal property sort of thing. So yeah, this seems like... I mean, come on. Just imagine for 5.5 seconds Biden wanted to take a $400 million 747 Flying Palace jet from the Qataris, right? Just imagine for half a second Republicans would lose their minds. They'd be calling Biden a traitor. They'd be calling him a puppet. I mean, come on. Just imagine for a second Kamala got elected and did something like this, right? They would never allow it. It would be all they could talk about. And I guarantee you, all of like my slightly conservative but apolitical leaning friends that ended up voting for Trump this time around and barely follow politics at all would hear about it too. And they'd be like, next time we hang out, they'd be like, oh my God, you hear Biden? He just took a $400 million jet from Qatar. Oh my God, that's pure corruption, right? And he gets to keep it after. Oh my God, they would never shut up about it, bro. But I guarantee you, like, if I bring this up to them, they've either never heard about it, or they don't care, or it's so frustrating, man. It's just the double standard that seem to hold for this Trump administration and others with regards to rank corruption is just like, it's a joke, right? It's just an absolute joke. And of course, everybody knows it's not a bribe if you just know. All you have to do to keep something from being a bribe is just say it's not a bribe, guys. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. U.S. Justice Department Civil Rights Unit faces mass exodus. The U.S. Justice Department's office tasked with protecting people's civil rights has lost 368 employees since President Donald Trump took office, in a mass exodus that has coincided with a dramatic policy shift away from its historical mission of protecting marginalized populations. The staffing decrease at the Civil Rights Division, disclosed on Wednesday in its congressional memo from U.S. Senator Peter Welch, represents an unprecedented exodus of career officials who usually remain in their roles from administration to administration, regardless of political party. He said DOJ provided the figures to his office on July 15th. Prior to Trump's inauguration, the division employed more than 400 attorneys. Reuters could not determine how many of the departed 368 officials worked as attorneys as opposed to other roles such as office support staff. Of those who left, 270 took the government's deferred retirement program, while 98 resigned. Welch, a Democrat from Vermont, released the figures ahead of a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee hearing on Wednesday where Harmeet Dillon, Trump's head of the Civil Rights Division, testified before members of Congress for the first time since her confirmation hearing in February. In his memo, Welch said that since Trump took office in January, the Civil Rights Division has disregarded its statutory responsibilities to enforce laws that prohibit discrimination and had enabled civil rights violations to be committed against people and institutions as part of Trump's political agenda. The question before this Congress is whether we are going to save the Civil Rights Division or we're going to destroy it, Welch said on Wednesday. The Civil Rights Division's mandate dates back to the passage of the 1957 Civil Rights Act, which was initially enacted to protect the rights of Black people by undoing discriminatory Jim Crow segregation, enforce people's voting rights, and pursue hate crime cases. Congress has expanded the division's responsibility over the years to include protecting Americans from from discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, sex, disability, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and military status. Dillon has upended the division's traditional enforcement priorities and refocused them on Trump's directives, mandating such actions as curbing the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, banning transgender youth from playing on sports teams that do not align with their birth gender, and prohibiting transgender youth from accessing gender-affirming care. Wow, 2 of these 3 are anti-trans stuff, bro. That's crazy. It's like just such a not serious issue too, right? There are so few trans athletes out there that like it's just, I don't know. It's just so it is like the pure definition of like distract them with unimportant bullshit so we can sneak in the really bad serious stuff in the back when they aren't paying attention. It is like the purest example of that because it's just not a serious issue. There are just so few trans athletes out there that like why to be doing something this big is just with the official reason given being these trans athletes is just so stupid. Discrimination under the guise of DEI has permeated every level of our society, Dillon told lawmakers on Wednesday. When I hear the words or the slogan DEI, what I hear is discrimination, exclusion, and intolerance. So one way I've heard the conservative mindset described, and I think this sort of leans into that, is the idea that like many on the left, quote unquote, I hate using that term, but many who see themselves as more left-leaning or progressive are against the concept of hierarchy. And generally speaking, they don't believe that the hierarchy is a good thing, that it's not natural. And that conservatives do believe that the hierarchy is a natural thing. And liberals are, taking this natural hierarchy and trying to sneak people into different parts of the hierarchy. Somebody that should be in a lower part of the hierarchy, they're trying to sneak them up to the top based on race or them being transgender or whatever. Maybe I'll add the insert clip of whatever I was talking about here.
Conservatives generally feel what's wrong with the world today can be chalked up to people not being where they should be in the social order. They used to be where they belonged, but then liberals gummed everything up with their government handouts and forced representation.
Earlier this year, Dillon rescinded most of the investigative findings issued by the division during President Joe Biden's tenure, which documented widespread civil rights abuses by police departments against predominantly people of color or people with disabilities. She also nixed 2 pending court-approved settlements to implement reforms with the Minneapolis and Louisville police departments following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. The division's leadership has also ordered career staff to dismiss a variety of other ongoing civil rights cases involving discrimination against people of color, while simultaneously pursuing probes against jurisdictions and institutions it accuses of improperly implementing DEI policies on everything from college admissions to hiring. The division's leadership has also ordered career staff to dismiss a variety of other ongoing civil rights cases involving discrimination against people of color, while simultaneously pursuing probes against jurisdictions and institutions it accuses of improperly implementing DEI policies. To me, this is sort of like the last story. Like, if you were trying to act in good, like if you were acting in good faith, right? And you really think that these DEI policies are terrible and that you want to use the division's power to go after them, I would be extremely worried about diverting resources away from civil rights cases because of the PR-ness of it, right? If I was legitimately interested, if I legitimately thought that these DEI policies were bad and I wanted to use the division to go after them and try and dampen their effect in institutions and whatnot, I would be super worried about people arguing that I'm just being racist, basically, because I dropped civil rights cases at the same time, right? I would, if this was me, if I was trying to at least make it seem like I'm acting in good faith, I would go after these DEI policies like they're saying, but also keep this civil rights cases that, about discrimination against people of color, keep those ongoing and probably even amplify them. Right, but the fact that they're diverting resources and telling career staff to dismiss a variety of other ongoing civil rights cases to me makes me want to lean more towards the xenophobia, towards the racism angle. Makes me want to lean more towards they just don't like brown people. The fact that they have ordered career staff to dismiss a variety of other ongoing civil rights cases at the same time that they're doing this does, to me, make me want to lean more towards the xenophobia, racism angle of all of this. Dillon and some of the division's other politically appointed attorneys have taken the unusual step of publicly announcing the targets of various employment discrimination probes, such as the University of California and George Mason University, over DEI policies or anti-Semitism. On Wednesday, Dillon told lawmakers that many of her office's investigations are being spawned by whistleblowers and the general public. Since April, she said her office has opened investigations into 15 universities, 16 top law schools, and 7 medical schools over their admissions processes. So yeah, this shouldn't be surprising. I mean, my understanding was that there was another exodus from the DOJ whenever they did that whole Watergate 2 thing, where they basically had another Watergate with Mayor Eric Adams from New York, and they made a back-end deal that they would drop his corruption charges that the Biden administration had brought against him if he supported Trump's immigration policies during the campaign leading up to him being elected in 2024. My understanding was that a whole bunch of the DOJ attorneys and whatnot resigned over that. And so it seems like more and more just lunacy is going on at the DOJ, and they're losing all of these career attorneys. I just can't help but feeling like the Republicans are changing the rules, man. They're changing the rules of the metagame, and that Democrats need to recognize the rule changes in the metagame and act accordingly. Yeah, I suppose that's all she wrote. It has been Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this has been The Mike Wink Show. Peace out, y'all.